Well, it's good to be here with you all. I'm the acting executive director of Lausanne, now the executive director and CEO of the Lausanne movement. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you all. I understand there are no classes today, and that you have made an extra effort to come out, so thank you very much for that. It was wonderful to meet your dean this morning and spend some time with him and hearing some of his wisdom and experience with issues of global missions and the global church as well. So this afternoon we will try to cover a few different issues. I'll share a little bit about our broader ministry in Japan, and also about a little bit about Lausanne, perhaps, and talk about theological education in Japan. Our ministry, CBI Japan, was started in January 2004, and Japan is the largest unreached nation on earth, the largest unreached people group on earth. So it's really a wonderful slap in the face to Satan to have the headquarters of Lausanne now located in a place that he has in many ways influenced and owned over the centuries. So we trust and hope that it will be a part of God's plan of salvation to shine a very bright light, and many, many bright lights in that still dark place. Our ministry launched with a focus on theological education. In the early days, we were entirely focused on the launch of Christ Bible Seminary, which launched in April 2005. We were facing a great challenge to start something new in a country that has a church that in many ways has been languishing over the past decades after a time of some stronger response to Christianity and more coordinated effort for the gospel after the end of World War II. But yeah, we were able to launch the seminary and a few other ministries that very much complement the training of pastors, including church planting itself, outreaches to young people in the city, and publications. Last July, we were able to publish in Japanese John Piper's Don't Waste Your Life. We wanted to start in our first publication with a book that especially addresses and targets younger Christians, younger people in Japan, as it's very much an aging population. Our second book, what's our second book we're looking at? We're thinking about The Supremacy of God in Preaching, also by John Piper. So that's what we're planning towards next, and thinking about other potential publications as well. So before I get right into talking about theological education in Japan, I wanted to share a much better resource than just me talking about theological education, but to give you a chance to hear from a genuine Japanese Christian and graduate also of our seminary, and someone who is also a key leader for us moving forward. Shohei Ueki, he will introduce himself, but he is a wonderful younger Christian leader here in Japan. He will be a key leader moving forward for CBI and for CBS. And it's a rare thing to be able to meet a Japanese Christian. The Protestant church-going population in Japan is just 0.21%. That's Protestant church-going population. That would be an attendance on a Sunday morning. So evangelical population could be much smaller than that. So you're talking about perhaps 1 in 1,000 Japanese who would be an evangelical Christian. So it's kind of like seeing an albino deer or something. It's an endangered species that we hope one day will become a very common thing to see albino deer running around. A very common thing to meet a Japanese Christian and to hear from them and to see some of the impact that the gospel is and will be making in Japan. So I'm going to invite Shohei to come up and share about a little bit about his story and also about the impact of theological education on his life.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Shohei. Spelling is Hohei. However, it is much easier for you Americans to say here like SHOW, show, and HEY, so show and hey. I am serving at Christ Bible Institute as a director of admissions and academic affairs. So as Michael being the Lausanne director and CEO, I became one of the leaders of CBI whole organization as a Japanese. Michael introduced me as one of the endangered species, so I do recognize myself as one of that. However, this is not my, it is my privilege. However, this is not something I did in my life or I tried in my life at all. This is only God's grace and God's, wonderful will for me. So God chose me before I was born, and even He chose me before the creation of the earth. He chose Shohei Ueki as His son. I'm so glad and happy being a Japanese Christian, and it is great honor and privilege to stand in front of you and sharing my life testimony. So I am not only one of the Japanese Christian out of 127 million people, but at the same time, I am a fourth generation as Christian. My great-grandmother, she was a deacon in a church around 1908 to 9, and in the northern island called Hokkaido. That was definitely before the World War. So my root as a Christian is being more than 100 years. However, in Japan, in spite of 150 years of Christian history in Japan, fourth generation Christian and third generation and even second generation as an adult Christian is really very rare. So my life work is to keep God's covenant and spread God's covenant in generation and generation to my son, to my grandson, granddaughters, to my great-grandsons and daughters. However, my life is not that so faithful to God. I am now 33 years old, having 4 kids, but my younger life is really miserable. I was raised in a sports competition environment. I did swimming in elementary school years and did soccer in the middle school. In high school and college, I did long distance running. So I guess this is a little bit similar as American sports environment, but Japanese sports environment is really strict and surrounded by non-Christians. None of my friends in my club, sports club, was Christian. So I was raised having a double standard. Sunday going to the Christian and being a Christian, and maybe at home as well. However, other Monday to Saturday, totally non-Christian mindset. So I was such a rebellious guy in front of God's presence. So this is the reason why I said this is not something I did or I tried. It's only God's grace. God kept His promise and have been keeping His promise with His love and His covenant. No matter how I tried to flee from Him, I did try to flee from Him, but He kept me His presence in love. So I am so thankful, God, for His love and His redemption toward my life, and also my fathers and my kids. So I have now four children. I love to show them my family picture though, but I didn't prepare for that. I have 4 kids, and first one is 10 years old, John, and second one is 7 years old, Jay, and third one is girl, 5 years old. Her name is Japanese Yuzuri, meaning God's chosen portion, and fourth is Joe. So it is great privilege to raise up my kids as a Christian in a Christian covenant. At the same time, this is great responsibility for me to raise up in His covenant as a future Japanese Christian leaders. So my vision is to raise up Japanese Christian leaders, not only stick in Japan. Definitely, we want to spread the gospel of all Japan, but not only spreading gospel in only Japan, but also spread the gospel toward the end of the world, globally. Since 1860, foreign Protestant missionary came to Japan. It's been 150 years more. Japan has been blessed. But I would say Japan is not being to be a blessing. I want to be a blessing. Japan needs to be a blessing for Japanese, and especially those Asian countries. We did so terrible things as a Japanese toward Asian countries, like Dr. Michael or his Korean descendant. I believe God is using me for His great will, great work, for being a blessing. So I'm so blessed, and I'm so excited about myself to be a blessing. Even though I am nothing, I have nothing to do. I'm really weak and simple. But again, it's only God's grace and God's tremendous, great redemption for me, love, forgiveness, so that I can be a blessing. May God use me. So I'm working and serving God with Dr. Michael at Christ Bible Seminary. It's been 8 years since the CBS, Christ Bible Seminary, is established. Now we have 18 students, full-time students. It's really such a wonderful blessing. Thinking almost 2,700,000 people of Japanese Christians, and 18 students are preparing for the ministry in Japan. Those who are more than 150 million people. So our seminary is really exciting seminary. There are many seminaries in Japan actually, but most of the seminary is sadly shrinking the number. So we are the very huge number of seminaries are, which is growing. So we are excited about our ministry, especially focusing on Japanese younger generation, so which is remarkable. So as Dr. Michael O shared about the whole organization, the Christ Bible Institute, we have 3 branches of the ministries. First, I mentioned before, the Christ Bible Seminary. And second one is the local ministry called Heart and Soul. Our organization ministry want to be not only be in international ministry, but also we want to be really rooted in the soil in Japan. So this is the Heart and Soul is the one of the rooting soil ministry, having a Heart and Soul cafe, aiming to spread the gospel, sharing the gospel, good news to local people in Nagoya. There's so many moms in the mornings coming, and afternoon there is a college around us, and college students coming, so that our seminary students has a great opportunity to get connected and share the gospel afternoon or evening after their study. And also we are doing the third thing is called Ministry International Church Planning Ministry called All Nations Fellowship. So it's been 5 years since we started the All Nations Fellowship. We have counting over 40 nations, people are coming, visiting. So we're going to be a great testimony and sharing the gospel, church planning work, not only for people in Nagoya, but also people who are coming to Japan, Nagoya. There is a city called Toyota City next to Nagoya, which is the headquarters of Toyota car company. So many people from foreign country come to Toyota City to work in Toyota, and they can come to All Nations Fellowship so that we can get together and connected and worship together, which is really wonderful. So our ministry, seminary, and whole organization is only 8 years. We are small. We are young. So, but we are so excited. So I would like you to pray for us and encourage us. It would be great if you have a chance and opportunity to come to Japan and stop by our ministry. That'd be great. So I'm so glad to share my testimony and about our ministry to you. And thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shalane. So let me pull back a little bit in terms of sharing about kind of the historical landscape of Christianity in Japan, more in the modern era. In the post-World War II period, we had some broader participation in gospel ministries in Japan. You had most of the major denominations that were sending missionaries. To be honest, it was not as strong of an effort as it could have been, partially because there was a lukewarm response to mission work to the Japanese. There was obviously a lot of bitterness still after the war, and it's very much understandable. That is the same kind of divided sentiment for my own people, the Koreans, for current day mission work in Japan. There was some level of responsiveness after World War II, and leaders were raised up. It was a fairly young leadership at that time. Educational institutions were also established, and churches were planted. What happened in the subsequent decades after that was some establishment of what it means to be a Japanese Christian, what Japanese churches look like. And as often happens with institutions and organizations and peoples, is that there eventually became some level of stagnation. The church didn't continue to develop and didn't continue to respond to some of the social changes that were going on within the country and also globally. So when people ask, how is it and what were some of the main priorities in terms of why Christ Bible Seminary was established, there are at least three reasons. Number one, theological reasons. One of the main focuses for Christ Bible Seminary is to establish a grace-based, Christ-centered, compelling presentation in terms of the classroom and also in life of Reformed theology. So we focus on Reformed theology. Maybe are most similar to a school maybe like RTS, where we are an independent school, not affiliated denominationally, but we come from various backgrounds, but all with a commitment to Reformed theology. Interestingly, though, our students come from a very wide variety. I'm from the PCA and with an MTW missionary. But our school has only 2 Presbyterian students, I think. So they are a minority. Presbyterians are a minority, and people from a Reformed background are also a minority. But it's really been wonderful to see how our students have really responded to what it means to have a gospel focus. And that's been really wonderful. And that's one of the ways that we're able to bless and also influence within the Japanese church. A second reason is, including in theology, is that over the decades you've also seen a growing liberalization of the church, growing influence of liberal theology. And one of the reasons why I can share about this is that, and this is something, an anecdotal piece of information that most people in the world actually wouldn't really know much about. But people often ask, why is it that in Korea today we have, 7, 8 of the largest churches in the world, and in Japan we continue to be the largest unreached nation of the world? I have a wonderful friend, Addison Salto, who is in his upper 80s. He was one of the early missionaries after World War II, I think from 1951 or 52. For many years after. And he shared a story with me that in the early days, when they were in the early 1900s still, actually, before the war period, there were a lot of theological debates that were going on in the Presbyterian church. And they were debating about fundamental issues. And when it came time for missionaries to be distributed to the mission field, in those days you didn't necessarily just choose your field, the denomination chose for you. When there were candidates who were interested in Asia, they decided that they didn't want to replicate the theological debates that were going on, the battles really, that were going on here in the mission field. So when a missionary candidate came to the mission board, who was conservative in their theology, they decided to send them to Korea. And when a missionary candidate came to them who held to a liberal theology, they decided to send them to Japan. And when I heard that, I just had goosebumps. It was just a really, I'll never forget that moment. And thought, what an incredible disservice that was to Japan as a mission field. And you do see, in terms of some of the theological development in Japan, that it's a very liberal theology. in terms of their approach to Scripture, in terms of their view of the church, and in terms of perspectives on salvation. Very fundamental issues. So the theology that developed after World War II in Japan was a more liberal theology, and that eventually influenced into the modern day. So that was one of the reasons why we established Christ Bible Seminary. A second reason is in terms of geography. In Japan, you actually have, I think close to 40 theological seminaries, which is not that many, obviously, compared to America and other countries, but it's quite significant, quite a significant number for such a tiny Christian population. Maybe 270,000 Christians in Japan. But that would include seminaries, Catholic seminaries, very liberal seminaries, and the evangelical ones. Among the evangelical seminaries, you'd have the vast majority of those seminaries being 1 or 2 students, some with 0. And the majority of those seminaries in Tokyo and also in the Kobe area. So we had some geographical reasons also to establish the seminary. And in the city of Nagoya, which is right in the center of Japan, in between Tokyo and Osaka, the 2 largest cities, Nagoya being the 3rd. And this is Nagoya Station right here. And this is the location of our seminary. It's about a 5-minute walk from Nagoya Station, which is a wonderful blessing for us. And if I have time, I'll share the story of how we got that building. So we had geographical reasons and also pedagogical reasons. What happened is that the churches and the seminaries tended to continue to replicate and hold on very tightly to the kind of almost infallible model that the missionaries had explained to them right after the war. And so change didn't happen. And it became a very entrenched theological education pattern and institutions. And I think in many ways didn't really adapt to the younger generations, both the church in terms of its outreach, but also educational institutions. So we wanted to establish a new seminary for a new generation. That was kind of our original slogan. Trying to find an engaging classroom where things like spiritual development, which I know is emphasized here at Beeson, and evangelism, mission, outreach, a family-oriented atmosphere. That's very much how our seminary is described. And it's been quite a wonderful experience to see how God has been blessing and how younger people have been responding to all 3 of those need areas: theology, geography, and also pedagogy. We have tried to be, in many ways, a transformational dynamic within a very entrenched church and society in some ways. One of our ministries is called Heart and Soul, and it's a quarterly event, a worship event, an outreach event, and it's really would look very normal here in America. You bring some of the younger people together, high school, college, young adults, contemporary worship, and very simple preaching. Preaching on the gospel implications on issues that impact young people, that humans care about. Gospel implications on work, joy, money, sex, failure, issues that are very much relevant. And it's just a simple presentation of gospel implications in those areas. Wonderful both for non-Christians who understand the gospel, but also for Christians who need to understand the gospel. And it's been a wonderful place where we've gathered anywhere from 80 to 150 people coming out for these events. So that's been a great blessing. And when we started Heart and Soul, and this will give you a little bit of insight into the culture and also the challenges that we face at Christ Bible Seminary, we faced some great opposition. And this was back when we were, my wife and I were there in 1998 and 99. And one lady said, are you trying to drop a bomb in our church? Because we had drums at Heart and Soul. And it was just radical at the time, guitars and drums. And I think in many ways, we've tried to introduce some new ideas, whether drums and guitars or small groups and dialogue and spiritual formation and talking about purity and sexuality and what it means to live a missional life and reach out to the lost and establish cafes and things like that, where people have said, well, we can't do that. That's not Japanese. Now, a lot of my background in studies have been in anthropology. And, the first couple of times I think that I heard such comments, I kind of just bit my lip and tried not to say anything. But eventually I started to speak out more. And, basically respond, well, I beg to differ. I would actually argue that some of the patterns that have been established in some of the more traditional entrenched churches in Japan, that those aspects are not actually Japanese. That's actually 1950s Midwestern American Christianity.
Amen. Everywhere.
That have calcified over 50, 60 years. And a part of our mission for Christ Bible Seminary has basically been to establish space for our students, our young Japanese students, to be able to, in community, in the Word of God, in prayer, decide for themselves, through the leading of the Holy Spirit, what authentic Japanese Christianity will look like for their generation. And we have scars on our back. Those of us who have formed that circle and have tried to protect them and create that kind of space. But it's been a wonderful blessing to see how God honors perseverance and patience and hopefully also humility. And we've seen how God has allowed that space to be created, how young people are responding, and how they've been able to, in a really compelling way, be able to start thinking about what Christianity should look like for their generation. It's a very much more globalized Christianity. It is a relationally engaging one. It is a socially sophisticated one in technology as well. And it's exciting. And you'll see ways where some of the only churches in Japan that are actually really growing and vibrant are all similarly globalized, similarly contextualized, and similarly engaging with the young people in society. And our church is kind of like the parallel, our seminary is kind of like the parallel to those churches that are thriving. So let me give you a little overview. This is our building that the Lord provided for us about 2 years ago to this day. And originally it was valued at, during the real estate bubble, at about $20 million. During the real estate bubble, which burst about 20 years ago, 5 feet by 7 feet plot of land in downtown Nagoya cost about $135,000. So this room alone would be a multi-million dollar room, piece of land. By God's grace and really just miracle, we were able to purchase this building 2 years ago for $1.2 million. If you can see again, it's an amazing location, perhaps the most downtown ministry in all of Japan. In 5 minutes, I walk pretty fast, but in 5 minutes I can walk from our front door and be on a bullet train. Within an hour 35 from there, I can be in Tokyo. Within 46 minutes in Osaka. So within an hour 40 from our front door, we had access to about 50 to 60 million people. It might be the only place on earth that in an hour and 40, you can hit 50 to 60 million people. And this is the front window of our Heart and Soul Cafe, which was the response to a vision that God gave us 7 years ago to create a safe space for young people in the city. In the cities in Japan, you have a tremendously dangerous environment for young people. There's something called enjo kosai, which is basically compensated teenage prostitution. In Japan, in one study, 9% of high school girls reported having participated in enjo kosai. 9%, 9 out of every 100 girls, high school girls. In the cities, that would be much higher, and in the rural areas, much, much lower. So it's hard to understand, and it's heartbreaking. 4% of middle school girls as well report having participated in enjo kosai. So this was our response to Heart and Soul Cafe after God provided this location for us. A safe space where young people can come and be safe relationally, emotionally, physically, sexually, spiritually in the gospel. I don't know how we did that. Oh, here we go. All right. Here's our incoming students in our last year's convocation. Convocation. Last year we had 13 incoming students, which was really amazing. We have, as Shohei mentioned, 18 full-time students now. That number will increase next month, hopefully significantly. Just to put that in some perspective, that was a graduation. The largest seminary in Japan today may have about a full-time equivalency of about 28 students. So Beeson is a relatively small school compared to some of the larger schools in America. For our number, which is significantly smaller than Beeson, we would be one of the larger schools. This past semester, we had, I think, more than 55 part-time students. I understand there are no part-time students at Beeson, which is a wonderful model. Not really appropriate for Japan's context, but our full-time equivalency may have been beyond 28. So we might have been the largest seminary actually in Japan in this past semester, and we hope to continue to grow. But being 29 students is not our goal. Our goal is to see significant spiritual change in the growth of the church in Japan. So this is a course that I teach, which is on spiritual formation, and it's called Personal Holiness. We've had lots of different wonderful professors who have come through over the years to help teach. Brian Chappell, Don Carson, Willem Van Gemeren, Robert Coleman. Next year, John Piper will be coming to Japan. And that's the bullet train. And right here is our building. So you get a fabulous view coming in or out from Tokyo of our building here. And right here, we're going to be putting up a new cross and sign as well. So, I want to make a quick announcement over here with Darcy, and then I'm going to give a little chance for you to ask some questions.
I'm going to be passing around a sheet if you want to put your email down, if you want to receive ministry updates from CBI. I'm going to start from the back because the last shall be first. And we have treats for you guys on the back table when you leave today. We have buttons, Pray for Japan, Christ Bible Seminary buttons. If you would take a button, but moreover, Pray for Japan. There's also a bookmark with some particular ways to pray. And I know you use books here, so I thought that could be handy. You'll also see what's the seminary lookbook, which has a lot of great text in Japanese and really incredible photographs. But if you're interested in taking one of those with you, they're on the back table as well. We wanted you to be able to kind of carry this in your heart and your mind and on your lapel with you as you go. So I'm going to start the sheet in the back.
Thank you. Thank you. And just as a last challenge, there was a war, and it was a fierce war, and there were very few soldiers that were fighting in that war for the good side. And the territory that was involved in that war was huge. And the sending side was a very prosperous, very comfortable nation and nations. And those nations were filled with extremely skilled and young and able soldiers, and also filled with unbelievable military tactical experts with incredible resources, incredible artillery, incredible weaponry. The tragedy was that those nations and those military experts and those special soldiers was that they stayed home. And the soldiers who were out there were facing an incredible battle, being undermanned, under-resourced, and there was a continual call through the walkie-talkies for a sending of reinforcements, for the sending of resources, for the sending of military experts. That is our situation right now in the mission field. We have today a situation in America where any pastoral opening receives hundreds and hundreds of applications for only one position, where we have openings at a Christian college or at a theological seminary for a professor with thousands of applications. We have today hundreds and thousands of unemployed seminary graduates. We have today hundreds and thousands of unemployed Christian PhD holding servants who would rather remain unemployed and rather apply for the next opening of a pastoral position or of the next professorship than go overseas where there are thousands of openings for missionaries and pastors and professors. It is a tragedy of our day. I encourage you and challenge you to open your heart to the war that is being waged out there, under-resourced, underappreciated. You will not get an award. You will not get respect. You will not get prestige, and it won't be something that many people will recognize you for. But there is a need for soldiers and for those who will go and serve in a very fierce battle that is going on. So I leave you with that challenge before we take a few questions.
What is maybe one resounding cultural difference between the Japanese people and American people? And what is maybe a ministry assumption that is held here in America in our context that would have to be changed or to change?
Good question. One prevailing cultural difference between Americans and Japanese, and then what sort of a ministry perspective or strategy that would need to change to meet that reality. let's just take an interesting one, which is just the physical landscape of the countries and how that impacts culture. America is amazingly wide open, huge, large, not crowded. There are hardly any boundaries. You know, you can go for miles and miles and hundreds of miles and thousands of miles even without hitting a coast. And that is a huge influence on the development of culture. Even looking at like forestry and, you know, in Japan, you take this tiny bonsai tree and you snip it until it is exactly perfectly every single tiny leaf and branch and millimeter until it's perfected in exactly the way you want it, and it occupies some precious space in your house or office or garden or whatever. Because the living space is so tiny, you have to think very carefully about physical resources and natural resources. That is how the Japanese approach that nature. In America, we are able to, knock out huge tracts of land and trees, and when we do landscaping, it's with huge, trees and bushes and fields and everything. That kind of level is completely different. In Japan, it's almost like if I were to lock that door and lock this door, and maybe even shut all the windows, and say, okay, we are now as a group going to spend the next year living in this room together. No one leaves. There's a toilet over here, a shower over there. How will the culture of this room and all your interactions, all your relationships change, shift radically? 1 year later, they open up the door, and what kind of a culture and group do they find? Number one, first thing that's going to happen, there will be rules. Rules that you never thought of, but suddenly there are rules. You will be a very different person. You will understand how to completely ignore people around you and try to focus on something, even though you're surrounded by 40 people. You will find that those who step out of line, those who do not follow the rules, will be punished. Because we have to survive in this small space, right? That is how Japanese society developed. A huge, really huge population on the landmass the size of California. The living space of it, really 1/3 that size. On an island with centuries-long global isolation, with a single hereditary rule for 1,500 years. That's how Japanese society developed. Change will not happen easily or quickly. It's a very different mindset. So, missionaries need to understand the history, the anthropology of the Japanese people, and understand how to appreciate small scale of things, and also how to help Japanese people also look beyond what exists now, how to see the horizon, how to see all of creation that God has made, and how to see some of the influences that have been controlling how they think and live and feel. Another question? Yes.
Hey, I'm Chris. Thanks for coming.
Sure.
It sounds like you have a lot of great outlets, like the coffee shop for for your students to do hands-on ministry in the city. Is there an overlap, or is there an emphasis within your theological for ministry training as well, or are those connected?
Yeah, most of our students are involved in various church ministries. In our church planting ministry, we've had, maybe 8 to 10 different interns who've come through over the years. 3 of our 4 leaders who are taking over the day-to-day leadership of CBI with my new position with Lausanne. 3 of the 4 of them are graduates of our seminary, and the other went to some place called RTS. Yeah, that's definitely a major emphasis, as well as, again, in terms of evangelistic outreach. We encourage them to take English classes at our English school, to meet with non-Christians, to hang out at the cafe, and get a chance to make relationships and also to share the gospel. And we also bring our students, during their 3 years, they all will go on a mission trip. Last time to Thailand, and next to Cambodia, and vision trips to the U.S., Korea, etc. Yes?
As MDiv students, if we were looking for potentially theological education in the mission field, how would you counsel us as to steps beyond after graduation from the MDiv program?
Number 1, confirm those gifts in teaching, find opportunities in the church to exercise them and get feedback from other leaders. Number 2, the level of education that you need for theological education differs according to the field. In Japan, it's preferable for us, more of our professors will have PhDs, and that's very helpful. In other places like Latin America, parts of Africa, parts of South Asia, Southeast Asia, MDiv students would be a clear 1 to 2 degrees higher than your student, and that allows you to teach in those institutions. So I would recommend that you only get a PhD and attempt to get a PhD if you're called to it, because it is torturous.
I'm a student, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm curious about your students. Where are they coming from? I know that the Baptists have 2 or 3 seminaries, at least that which was associated with the Southern Baptist, and then later, of course, with the Nihon Baptist St. Kildan. Are most of your students coming from, if they're coming out of churches, are they coming from a Kildan church or more of the assemblies churches, and do you have any Baptists coming from the Baptist churches, because they do have their own seminaries? And if you have students who might come from what Southern Baptist missionaries have been involved in with their church planting movement, where really what we know is organized seminary training is really not so very strong now.
Right.
Just where are your students coming from? And I want to
Yes.
make one comment too, if I might.
Sure.
You talked about the older missionaries there. And you apparently are Presbyterians.
Yes.
But I want you to know that those old missionaries of the Presbyterian established a Baiko in Shimonoseki, Baiko school,
Okay,
which is a girls' school, and it made that city very sensitive
Yeah.
to the presence of Christianity, so that it was possible to plant churches there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that foundation was there from the Presbyterians.
Some of my greatest inspirations and some of my greatest heroes are people like John M.L. Young, people like Bruce Young, his son, Addison Salto, Phil Foxwell. There's an amazing generation of these. I guess all of them really were in their 60s to 80s. People who established through their blood, sweat, and tears all the foundation of gospel ministry in Japan. To answer your first question, our students come from all over. It's really interesting. We have actually students represented from the Kiriso Kyodan, the more liberal church in Japan. We have Baptists, we have Charismatics, we have Presbyterians, we have Independents. So almost all of the different denominations and backgrounds. So if I had to characterize how or when these students have come, I think they tend to be people whose, especially some of their church leadership perhaps, are a little bit outside the box thinkers perhaps, to allow them, there's some level of support. There's either strong support or I'll endure you coming, endure you going. So there's been kind of a wide variety. But I love the diversity of the students. I love the fact that we have Kyodan student, and interacting with the Baptist, interacting with the Presbyterian, interacting with a charismatic background. So I hope that's something that continues, and perhaps is also somewhat reflective of Beeson's student body and a broader evangelical students.